Just came out of nowhere.
Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Masterclass Mondays. I am your host, Anastasia, and today we have the Zen Master, Zachariah Aurelius. Zachariah. I met Zachariah around 6 years ago, 5.5 years ago. Can't remember exactly. And my first experience of him is I was working in a little deli, and he came in as a customer. And the very first thing I noticed about Zachariah was his presence. And it was presence like I'd actually never seen or experienced before. And I have traveled to India and spent a lot of time with monks. And yeah, it was something quite... it took my breath, but also brought breath to me when I met him, when I saw him, and I saw how present he was and how just so in the moment. And I remember actually talking to the people I was working with. I said, did you see that man? Did you see how present he was? And they were like, what do you mean? like a gift? I'm like, no, never mind. And yeah, and so even though it took me a little while to realize who Zachariah was to me, I still will never forget that moment of seeing him and seeing his gift of presence, and also watching just how he moved with life and through life in that time. And so he was embodying much of a monk style life, and then I kind of came in and turned that upside down with an instant family and then two more children very quickly. So I'm really actually delighted to be interviewing you, my beloved, and to really hear your wisdom around mindfulness and how that came about in your life, and also how it now continues to unfold with all the changing, the forever changing circumstances. So passing over to you.
Thank you, beautiful girl. Angelic in that glowing white. The sun on your white top there. Just when you were talking, it reminded me of a conversation I was having with my beautiful friend Emmanuelle last night. She's a yoga instructor, and she spends a lot of time in India as well. And we were speaking about how her father told her when she was a little girl that he had regretted having a family because it took him from his spiritual path. And she was sharing the block that created for her. And then just recently she cleared that block, and she was actually speaking to her father at a retreat. Actually, it was the Eckhart Tolle event recently. And he said, oh, no. He said, having children is one of the most godly things you can do. And she's like, oh, Dad, why didn't you say that years ago? And we were sharing that's what happened for me. It wasn't that, you mentioned turning my life upside down in the most beautiful way. Having children and a family and a beloved partner for me is the next step in my spiritual journey, not something that detracts from it or takes away from it, or if it does challenge that journey, it's for the furtherment of that journey, not to detract or distract me from that journey. And it even took me a couple of years to really see that. And I think that I'm stepping into a path and carving a path even that is perhaps even new, where those two come together. Our spiritual path deepens with our family life, with our everyday life. And there's a quote from Khalil Gibran from The Prophet, which is one of my favorite books, where he says, our temple is our daily lives. And I really feel like that's what my temple has become. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's quite
But I
liberating,
was,
isn't it?
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And, there was a couple of years there, it was like, I can't do this. Children and mindfulness at the same time. And I was, I was definitely challenged with that. And there were points where I was like, yeah, I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I can pull this off. Do I let go of the spiritual practice and just sort of weather the storm of young children? And just really recently, even something really magical is coming where it has been working. It has been coming in for me in spending time with my two children together, the two little ones. So Anastasia and I sort of have these beautiful arrangements where she'll go off and create and do her thing, and I'll take the little ones out. And I'm stepping into that place where I feel really present, and then I invite them into that. And obviously children are really present, so they're my constant mirror. And they do deepen my practice, and I think that's really beautiful. And we can have both. And I see a lot of stuff even on social media around children and things like how they drain the life from us, or they something along those lines. And I'd really love to turn that around in our belief system and what's possible. And children can deepen that for us. They can actually show us the way home. They're not the ones that are pulling us away from that. That's us. And we can't blame the children for that. Children are actually there saying, hey, it's over here, that which you're looking for, that place of wonderment and joy and all of those things. They're actually showing us where it is, and we can just listen and watch and learn from them. And I really appreciate our children for that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, me too. I feel like yeah, they are an embodiment of the very thing that we're searching for. And
Yeah,
yeah,
they're being it, they're living it.
they're in our face to remind us of that.
Yeah, and they pull us out of spiritual ego, which is a real trap. And people delve into what they think of as a spiritual path, and it can look like certain things, and that's fine. But what it can actually start to do is pull you into spiritual ego, where you start to think that, oh, I'm being spiritual. And children are just like, they just shatter that illusion. And I really love that about them, because it is a real trap with the spiritual path. The ego will grab hold of anything it can. And if it's not succeeding in beating you up, or some other avenue of attachment, then it'll choose this very spiritual path that you're on, and it'll turn that into an egoic creation and distract you from the truth. And I think I see that in a lot of fields, a lot of spheres. So children don't allow that to happen.
Yes, they are very, very potent, humbling mechanisms.
Yeah, they are.
So, can you tell us a bit about your journey into mindfulness, and just how, because I know when I met you, you had a very incredible, you held a very, very incredible space. And I know that for the many years that you had your Pilates studio, that's what people were so drawn to. They were so drawn to your presence and the level of peace and stillness you had within. And even though that was a little bit scary for me at times, that's very much what I was drawn to. And so, for those of us that don't innately just have that, what was your journey towards that experience and having that on a daily basis?
What I'm drawn to share, it's not the beginning, but it's the point that profoundly shifted things for me. In fact, there are two that are coming to me immediately. Because even as a child, I was a dreamer. I would stare off into space, and my parents would wonder where I was. And they were both, I guess you could call them hippies. And I was born on Vancouver Island in Canada, and Mum and Dad basically lived out of a tent and a canoe, and Dad had a guitar, and they lived like that for 2 years when I was a babe. So that was my first 2 years of life. It was underneath trees and living from tents and sitting in canoes. It wasn't living in a house. So I'm sure that had a very profound influence. But the two events that come to me most clearly, one was a near drowning incident. I think I was around 20 or 21 with my best friend Dan, and we thought we were surfers, so we both got these surfboards, and we'd grown up in central Queensland where there is no surf, so we were not surfers. And we ventured down the coast, and I was really fit, so I was able to get out into the surf, and we hit, I think it was somewhere like Burleigh, and it was really, really big surf. And I went out there, and Dan didn't manage to get out there. Fortunately for him, he got battered back to shore, and I made my way out into the back of the waves and was clueless about how to navigate that kind of surf. And I went under for a long, long time, a whole set basically. Dan couldn't see me, he said, for about 2 minutes. And there were all these visions and things, just reflections on memories from all the way through my childhood, memories that I couldn't even remember in conscious circumstances, but just they flashed past my mind in that moment. And then I went limp under the water, and I'm not sure where I went for that moment. And then when I came back, I hit my head on my surfboard, and I became conscious of where I was again. So that had a really profound influence on me, because I'd basically, in that moment of going limp, had let go of life or attachment to life. I didn't really have a choice. I was underneath the water. So that was one very profound experience. And then another was living in Spain, and I was traveling not long after that drowning incident, really, a few years. And I'd run out of money, and I ended up in the south part of Spain in Andalusia, and some people took me in on a farm, and I would eat fruit from their orchards, and this man, Chema, would wake me up in the morning before dawn and teach me yoga on this mountaintop underneath these stars. And no one spoke English there, and I was terrible at Spanish. So they just didn't even bother trying to talk to me in Spanish. They sort of spoke to me in what they called pidgin Spanish. And I was like this simpleton, that they kind of gestured to communicate with. But what happened in that time on that mountain was I didn't use the English language. And when I was reflecting on what to talk about today, that really came to me, the limitations of language and how we tend to rely upon language to communicate. But when I was on that mountain with these people, because we couldn't use, or I couldn't use the English language, this whole new realm of communication opened up to me. And I'll be sitting on that mountain, and because I couldn't speak to them using words, and there was a lot less thought, even the thought in English started to drift away for me, I became aware of this other dimension, if you like, the space in between everything. And really for me, that was that recognition of stillness or presence, that feeling of, and the light comes through as I said that, of presence and spirit. And it was just so simple and grounded, but so profound at the same time. And I think that gave me a window of what it feels like, where that presence, that feeling of spirit, is the dominant awareness. And I think we're brought up identifying with thought. And even when we're educated in school, Descartes said, "I think, therefore I am." And I don't think he really thought that through at all, because what happens when you're not thinking? Do you cease to exist? And that's what I love. It's, you can think, sure. That's just one faculty of the mind, to identify with a thought or to pursue thought. But then what about what is beyond thought? And I really feel like people in our society are so identified with thought now that they've sort of lost touch with what is beyond thought. And I wrote down something for this morning, and it was, there is something on the other side of thought waiting for you. And that led me away from my field at the time. So at university I studied ecology and life, and I wanted to know how life kind of interacted, how my degree was all about how everything in an ecosystem interacts with everything else to create a whole which is greater than any constituent part. That was my fascination as a child. And along with that came this really beautiful desire to protect and look after the earth. I was really passionate about the earth. And as a young child, I would watch all these documentaries by David Attenborough, and it was all about, the beauty of the earth. And then it would always end with, but that species is about to become extinct because we've wiped out this particular habitat. And I developed this aversion to human beings to the point where I didn't even consider myself to be a human being anymore. I was like, well, if that's what human beings do, well, I'm not a human being. And I delved into fantasy and the Lord of the Rings, and I became an elf instead of a human being, because I was like, I'm not identifying with people that pillage the earth and kill animals. And so I left that path from Spain onwards and went into movement. And got back from, actually not long after Spain, I went to England, and I ran out of money, and long before I went to Spain I ran out of money, but I thought that was a mistake. I thought I should go to England and get a job. And I got a job lifting these really heavy blocks under the River Thames curbstones, and I blew my disc out of my back and went back to Australia, and that's how I got into Pilates. So it's interesting how it started with yoga and that spiritual connection, and then sort of went into Pilates and movement from there. But always in the movement, whenever I taught Pilates, I felt like Pilates was often taught from a really mental place. It became too clinical for me. So I complemented Pilates with Qigong and Kung Fu and Tai Chi and all these Eastern arts, because they're all about being. They're all about the energy and the flow and the connection. And when I got into those movements, it wasn't moving meditation. It was a really beautiful moving meditation. And what I'm really passionate to bring to the world, amongst other things, is for meditation to not only be available to us when we're sitting on our own on a mountain with our eyes closed with a certain pose and our fingers in this position. And I want, meditation or a more meditative state to be present with us no matter what we're doing. We could be playing with our children or having this conversation. Like as I'm speaking to you all, I'm not just focused upon the conversation. I can hear the birds twittering in the trees, and I can feel the movement of the fig tree above me. And there's this presence that imbues the experience. And I feel like people do see something within me that they don't quite know how to articulate. And I feel like that's all that it is. It's just that I'm in touch with that aspect at the same time that I live life. And therefore my life is enriched and enhanced by that quality coming through us, the quality of spirit and awareness coming through our experience. And I'm sure we all know that when that becomes really shut down, like we have some sort of egoic or amygdala hijack, we call it, and we just, and we go into that really contracted state and we do things that don't feel like us anymore and it feels really awful. It's just where we've cut ourselves off from that state of being, or that higher self, if you want to call it that. And that's part of our lesson, is to be able to stay in touch with that no matter what we're experiencing.
So I think that's the answer to the question that I'm going to ask. But how do you do that? I think this has been one of my messages, is that we hear so many people talking about being in those states and returning to love and all of these kind of things. But if you're in a state that is not that, then what's the pathway? Like, how do we actually support ourselves to begin to let go of thought and welcome what's on the other side, or have the greatest
$1 million question. $1 million question, isn't it? And I too experienced that, because when I was, say, solo, I spent hours meditating, and I had, for want of a better word, a controlled environment that I'd created. I had this little temple by the beach and played only certain type of music and ate certain type of foods, and I only engaged with certain people that had a particular vibration, and my studio was set up in a similar way. So in a way, that state we're talking about was easier to attain. And then entering fatherhood, I was like, whoa, okay, how does one, stay in touch with that when all that happens with young children happens? And I feel like when that path, the dynamic is completely different. And there were times where I felt myself very disempowered. I was like, the tools that I had been using weren't serving me anymore, and I had to find new ones. And I really feel like what that has brought me is the ability to, one, relate with dare I say it, human beings, and two, to help them. Because, like Anastasia, you're really amazing at this, the bridge between where people find themselves in a state that we could call lost or contracted or whatever, and how to enter those states where we feel connected and return to love. And not treating those states that we might call contracted as negative, because that's part of the learning, the journey, the gift, if you like. Through those experiences, our awareness expands. But how to come back, and how to do that amidst the challenges of a daily life. And I really do feel like I really feel into synchronicity. It's not what do they call it, a coincidence. Synchronicities are there because there's a connection. And at that time in my life where I was entering fatherhood for the first time, and I was really passionate about bringing together spirituality and peace and presence with being a dad and a partner, that's when you discovered the oils, Anastasia, and brought them into our lives. And there's no doubt that they played a pivotal role in me being able to find that place. I remember on a very simple level waking up in the middle of the night with Tatiana. I think she was less than 1. She was crying really loudly, and she was obviously in pain. And how do you stay in a really beautiful, connected state when your baby's in that place? And then you sort of said, babe, just put some digestion on her belly and rub her belly. And suddenly I felt empowered again. And then I could find that place within me again where I was powerful, and then I could, assist her with my energy as well as the oils. And then there was this beautiful experience of her coming out of the pain and falling back asleep. So that's just a very simple example of where the oils help to bridge those two worlds. So that's one example. And then the other is that there are certain principles, I guess, that we learn in those spiritual endeavors. Say it was Tai Chi or Qigong or Kung Fu. But what I found was the principles, you can know the principle and you can apply the principle to, say, a Tai Chi movement. But applying the same principle to fatherhood is something else. It's the same principle, it's just a lot more challenging. And so really it was just an upgrade in the challenge. Here are the principles, you've got the principles, now apply them to a 2-year-old that really wants something and they're really determined to get that. And they've got, like Sumi, our son, has a will that is just phenomenal. And I remember this one time I was at home with Sumi and he was still breastfeeding at the time, and Anastasia was teaching some classes or something. And I wanted to put him to sleep. And I was determined that I was going to put him to sleep. And he was determined not to go to sleep. And there was this moment on the bed where I put him down. I said, Sumi, we're going to go to sleep. And I tried to meditate. And he started to really, Sumi's amazingly loud, isn't he, Anastasia? And he was kind of crying, but really loud. And I was like, no, I can cut through this with meditation. And I lasted about 20 seconds. And then I broke. And I was like, okay, Sumi, you win. No sleep for you today. And so it just shows you that, what I thought was strong, that ability to tap into that place wasn't as strong as I thought. And so now I really feel like my practice has strengthened and deepened with children. So to answer that question, what is that? What is that place? Or what are some ways to find that place again? And this is where I feel like meditation and some other practices really support you, because like I said, I'd been delving into these practices for 7 years straight before I met Anastasia. And obviously long before then, but for 7 years I've been focusing on them, and yet I still found it challenging come children to apply them. And so I think we need to create a space for ourselves, even if it's 5 minutes or 15 minutes, where we do find that place where thought ceases, or we're no longer focused upon thought, and we can sense being. And that's the simplest way that I can put it. Everyone knows how to sense being. It's that moment where you saw that gorgeous sunrise and you just went, oh. Often there will be a sound like that that'll come out of us. We call it awe or wonder. And that's what you're looking for, because when you're in that state of awe or wonder, even for a moment, you are connected with spirit and with being. And then when you find that place, and this is what I love about the oils, I call them an aromatic anchor. So, I've got Hawaiian sandalwood here, which is my favorite out of all of them. And it's, funnily enough, the oil of sacred devotion. But even when I'm struggling to find that place, when I smell the Hawaiian sandalwood, it's just like there. It's just like instantly there. It's a feeling state awareness, and Anastasia's pulling hers out. You got the same one, do you? We are very connected, Anastasia. And to me, this is something else I wanted to share this morning that I wrote down. To me, scent is a superior form of communication. There's something within scent, and there's something really cool too. Communication, if you trace it back to its Latin roots, it comes from the verb to share. I thought that was really awesome. And so when you're speaking to someone and you want to get to know them, if they're talking about themselves, this is my house and this is where I live and this is my name and this is my job, do you really know them? And a lot of people go to social events, and I used to despise social events for a long time, because I would go to them and people were just talking about what I felt like was rubbish. And I don't mean to devalidate their experience, but they were talking about things that meant nothing to me. I couldn't even see them through the conversation. And I really struggled with that and became quite introverted for quite a while. And what I realized that was missing for me was true connection. I wanted to be able to see them. And to me, there are deeper forms of communication than simply words and thought. We can use words and thought to articulate feeling, but we need to be feeling the feeling as we're articulating. If we've lost touch with the feeling and we're just thinking and we're just talking, then there's nothing there. The heart field is not really imbuing that experience or that conversation. And so for me, our communication can really deepen, and it needs to deepen if we are to share on a deeper level. And for us to share on a deeper level also means communion. It means for us to unite. And so if we want oneness, which is what we want, right, then we need to be able to communicate more deeply. And to me, scent does that. When a plant creates these essences and you smell Hawaiian sandalwood, there's something communicated in that scent that goes well beyond even seeing the tree. And if the tree could talk, whatever the tree said, the scent has something to it. And I really love that about the aromas.
Yeah, I love that, the way you've talked about that as a communication, because I often talk about in classes how the oils do communicate with our body, on a cellular basis. They have this communication. Scientifically it's called adaptogens, but really it's this synergistic communication that happens. And even on a scientific level, the oils are seen as information. The information that the body receives to then utilize to support its healing. I find, for me, the oils are so potent in bringing me into the present moment. I get really brought into the now of being, and there's, what they do on a neurological level to support my brain to actually, come into a space where it has less activity, and just being brought back into this moment. And there's something around the scent, the olfactory sense, and and how it actually operates with our being to just stop being in front of or behind where I am, just being right where I am in this moment.
Yeah. And how that is such a gift. That is, to me, the highest gift that the oils bring, is that they call you back into presence and back into communion with what is in this moment, what truly is in this moment. And it's such a phenomenal state of being. And to have a tool that brings you back into that state so quickly is a true gift. And so I share that I love all the myriad aspects that they bring to cleaners that are no longer toxic and you can spray around your children, or ways to deal with a bee sting or a stomach ache, or all these other things, because they're all relevant too. Because if you're in discomfort or you're in fear, it's very challenging to enter a state of being where you feel at ease, or you feel grace, or you feel peace. So on a very practical level, that does bring you back into presence. But then beyond all of those things is, like you said, Anastasia, when that sense of smell, the olfactory sense, and how that's linked with what I call our master glands, such as the pituitary gland, which is such a mouthful to say, and hypothalamus. But the way I feel into those glands is, to me, they're like the master glands, and on a molecular level, it's sort of emotion, and it's all of that, slightly less physical stuff, that it helps to affect that in a way that we prefer, or the way that we desire, the way we want to be. And then beyond that still, if there is this awareness, if you like, and there is energy and there's vibration, and then on another level down there's the molecular side of things, which is the information and all of that comes with that, where is the interaction? So where does the awareness come down through into those sort of faculties of biochemistry? And to me, it's the glands. The glands bring that about. And so if you've got aromas that directly interact with the pituitary gland and the hypothalamus gland and affect that side of us, if you like, or that aspect of us, then how cool is that to explore that? Mm-hmm. And I think that emotion, and I know there's a book called I think it's The Molecules of Emotion, and that realm is coming into mainstream science now, and awareness, and it's being accepted, if you like. So that's awesome for the Western world, because what comes next is energy and vibration, and I'm really excited for that, where those things are no longer deemed something that come from the East that are kind of weird. I don't even use the word chakras anymore, because people just get this weirded out vibe with chakras if they're not really comfortable with Eastern philosophies. And so if we can even just let that go altogether and create our own connections, our own language around it as Westerns, if you like, and become comfortable and familiar with energy, with vibration. And to me, that's how these plant essences work. And like you said, Anastasia, earlier, how do you get back into that state of awareness or presence or being when you're being pulled about by various emotions or thoughts? And if you identify with a particular thought that pulls you out of that place, that thought has a particular vibration connected with it. And the way that we come back again is what I call recalibration. And you can either get that by sitting in the presence of another being who's holding a vibration of love. Did that with Tatiana this morning. She woke up just fierce. She had this dream that Emma from the Wiggles had given her this music box, and you pressed the green button and it played ballerina music. And she was just furious that she'd woken up and it wasn't there to use. And I was feeling into how can I support her in this moment, because she was just like almost attacking me. And I was like, would you like me to go? And she's like, no. And there was nothing I could do. Right. And so I just went into a love state for a moment. I went quiet and just lied there and just connected with that place within me without wanting her to change. And within a few minutes, she settled and then gave me a hug, and then she came around. So that was where I helped her to recalibrate. If I sit under a beautiful big tree or sit in nature beside a river, that recalibrates me. It's like, have you ever seen, you get two metronomes, they're like, and you set one and you set the other and they're out. And I think you have to put them on a skateboard for this to work, I'm not sure. And then what happens is they calibrate, they tick together. There's something that happens when two beings or two entities come together where one calibrates the other. And you can either get pulled down into a lower vibration, or you can keep the higher vibration and help to bring that lower vibration up to a vibration. And to me, that's what the oils do. So we're feeling a little bit out, and we grab the Hawaiian sandalwood or your oil of choice, and and it's really key to be able to be present with the aroma, and the aroma can recalibrate you. And that's an amazing tool to have in a bottle. Absolutely. At your fingertips. You can't always enter. What if you're in a city? You can't go and sit beside a beautiful river instantly. Or what if you're with your children in the car? You can't all of a sudden go and meditate under a tree. But you can diffuse an oil and help to recalibrate yourself. And then as we do that, we teach our children how to do that, because they do what we do, not what we say. And just I wrote down the word mindfulness. I use it because it's in the Western world now. It's very common, but I'm not comfortable with the word mindfulness, because I think something was lost in translation when we came up with the word mindfulness. And you can trace it back to a term, Pali term, which is to remember. And so if people are wondering what is mindfulness, it's that place where you let go of all of the things that you've identified with that are not true, or the things you've identified with that are not you, and you go back to that place of utter peace where you feel who you truly are and you feel completely connected with what is. And when you enter that state, that's what it is. And I call that presence. And the name Zachariah, I researched it some years ago, it means he who remembers. And I thought that was really cool. That means I'm pretty much on par with my life purpose. And I want to be in that place of remembrance. And I'd love to help other people to find that place of remembrance as well. You know, a sandalwood tree knows what it is because it doesn't think. So therefore it can't think differently. So a sandalwood tree is a sandalwood tree. It is being what it is. And then by virtue of its existence, it has inherent worth and value. And that's what we've got to remember. We are who we are by virtue of who we are. And within that existence, we are vast and beautiful and infinite and worthy and all of those awesome things.
Yes, remembrance. It's that what I think about when I feel into the moments that I am mindful, and I feel like I have that a lot more, definitely since meeting you, but also, you know, I had been introduced to, you know, I had spiritual awakening prior to that, to meeting you in little stages throughout my life, and I'd experienced, you know, living up in Dharamsala and visiting the monks and practicing daily meditation, and the difference of that, and I was very afraid of losing that actually when I left, and I did when I left that area of the world. But just how we integrate that into our everyday life. And I think that that's something that, you know, to be realistic with, well, yes, meditation, you know, having an hour to meditate every day is a really powerful way to cultivate mindfulness throughout your whole day. But perhaps, you know, some people may feel like they actually can't afford that, or they're not able to take that. You know, they don't have the time, they don't have the peace, they've got all these people and commitments and requirements and things of them that don't afford them that, you know, hour of peace for them to really tune out and tune in. And I think that was something that I felt so empowered by when the oils came into my life, was that there was this really visceral and also sensual tool that could support me to actually achieve those states, as you said, in the stolen moments throughout the day, and to kind of anchor that in. And I think also it's something really important to mention is that, you know, mindfulness, it's like a training. It's like a muscle. Like you're just not all of a sudden ready for the Olympic swimming. Like you start with 5 laps and then 10 laps, and then it's a thing that's cultivated over time. It's strength and endurance and ability to stay in a more mindful state in your everyday is directly related to your cultivation of that. It's not just something you either have or you don't have. It's something that you continue to cultivate. And for me, actually using the oils on a daily basis, it's like I'm supporting that cultivation, like that they're constantly, and I'm using them for many different reasons. You know, for emotional support, for physical support, you know, for my own pleasure of life, but also for my state of being. And I feel like the longer I use them, the more strength I have in my mindful state. The more I'm able to stay in a meditative state throughout my day and through whatever the different moment. Yeah.
and in that is the training of the mind, and being able to, like you said, train the mind no differently than you would train the body. It's just something that you focus on consistently, and then you develop abilities. And I think of the mind very much like the lens of an eye. Even the eyes are an amazing organ. And as a photographer, we're constantly trying to get our cameras to do even just 1/10 of what the eyes can do. And I can look out over the vista that I'm looking at and kind of see the whole mountain range, or I can focus in on a single letter. And we can do that with our mind, can't we? We can sort of go into this diffuse state of awareness where we feel everything, or we can focus on something in particular. And in that, what's happening is the mind is perceiving, if you like, it's seeing what is. But then what happens behind that is the interpretation of that, which is where things get really confusing. And we start to put all these filters of perception across that. And so, to me, what mindfulness also is where we can train ourselves to reduce the interpretation, to actually begin to just observe what is and feel that. Observe what is and feel that. And to me, that is meditation. And so meditation, one of my favourite forms of meditation is bonsai. I love sitting there and crafting a bonsai. That is meditation. All I'm doing is feeling everything around me and focusing on the beauty of the tree. I lose myself in that practice. And so it doesn't have to look like sitting there with your eyes closed in an uncomfortable position to be meditating. And people might find different forms of meditation. And what are the aspects of meditation? If you get an overall sense of peace come through you, and you feel calm and connected in that moment, and you feel really present and activated, then you're meditating. And so you get to choose what that looks like, and I reckon that's really cool. Who says it has to look like any one particular thing? And I really feel like in the Western world we're being called into that now. Create our own version of spirituality, our own language around it, our own practices. What does that look like? What does that feel like? What words do we use to describe that? And that is what we're being called into now, because we're struggling without it. That is one of the, if not it is the primary cause of a lot of our struggle. It's because we become so identified with thought and conceptual thinking and all of that we've lost touch with the other, and we just need to reconnect. It's as simple as that. And that's why I love, just on this, I want some really practical stuff for people, is lemongrass. It's such a cleanser. And so if you know that being is what it is and it never goes away, and if you feel disconnected from being, it's just because you've covered it up with all these layers, these veils, then all you really need to do is clear away those veils. And that's what I love about lemongrass. I can smell lemongrass and just clear everything, and then all of a sudden that vision is clear again. I can see more clearly again. And when we can see ourselves clearly, we see each other for who we are, and we can love each other for who we are, and we can be who we are, and everything is beautiful, right? So we just need to be able to see our children or our experience or what's happening in our lives more clearly, because once the truth is unveiled, then we don't need to do anything else. Mm-hmm. Truth weaves its magic.
Yes.
That just brings me into one little thing that I wanted to share. We're getting close to the end of our time. And what it is that let's visualize that there is something, and let's call it what is. Okay, so I could be looking at a tree, I could be talking to Anastasia, I could be talking to you, I could be having a cup of tea, it could be anything, right? That is what is. Then there's an interaction. There's an interaction between you and what is, you and the other being, you and the tree, you and the cup of tea, whatever it might be. And what if our intention was to make that interaction more conscious? Because I've thought about this long and hard, and Anastasia and I have some really cool, we can call them debates, can't we, Anastasia, about this. And I've become really clear on what's going on here. The nature of the debate was me being the Zen monk said to Anastasia, it's all consciousness. This is in the early days. It's all consciousness, and I can create what I can create without the oils. And Anastasia said, yeah, but the oils do something anyway. Just use the oils and they'll create this outcome. And I'm like, yeah, but it's only related to your intention and your conscious creation around what the oils are and the meaning that you imbue in them. And so we had this really cool debate going on. And so I've got a new theory, Anastasia. I'm not sure how you feel about this one. And that is that it's both. It's like Forrest Gump when the feather's floating there at the end. It's like maybe it's a little bit of both. And this is what I feel like. People would come into my Pilates studio for want of a better word, healing, to return to wholeness. And they would say things like Pilates, posture. They were the words that they used because they feel comfortable, and that was fine. But as I started to observe them, I realized they needed more than just some kind of physical correction. They might have been holding on to grief or shut down in their throat chakra and their expression. And I would help to open them back up again. And often they weren't even really consciously aware of what was going on. They just knew that when they walked out of there, they felt better. So there's this interaction, if you like, between what I was creating for them and what they were experiencing. But it was kind of more in their unconscious, or let's call it their subconscious. They were kind of aware that there was something happening, but they weren't really sure. So the oils work like that, I feel. Someone can use the oils, and even if they don't really know what's going on, or they might even just breathe them and not even be that present and then move on with their day, and there will still be a benefit. Because what I feel like happens is there are aspects of us that we're just not conscious of. They're still there, and they're still interacting with the oils or with each other or with the environment, but we're just not conscious of that aspect of ourselves in that moment. And so the oils do that for us, and I call that stealth healing, so that's really cool. And what I would like to bring in is more consciousness around that, because there's so much joy there. So if we can become more conscious of how we interact or how the oils are interacting with our body, then that would be really beautiful. So when we smell the oils, just really smell the aroma without even calling it something anymore, and just really communicate with that essence. And then you really, I think, create more enjoyment around what that essence is bringing to you. So a little take on.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
And then we can do that with each other, right? We can sit with each other and just really feel into each other, and not just focus on the words or the topic of conversation, and just deepen our interaction with each other. And I think we'll achieve, we will receive more joy from each other.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it's something that we spoke about together on stage, which was fun.
Leadership, yeah.
Leadership, which was that, as we search for success, as we search for or reach for what we think it is that's going to make us feel that thing, it's actually the connection, that true deep connection of being with another and sharing a moment. And so, yeah, we can actually create that within our daily lives and not wait for that goal to fulfill that soul desire. And I really feel that actually it was just yesterday or the day before, our neighbours had a house party, house concert. It was really beautiful. And one of my beautiful neighbours in the Highlands, she was talking to me about the history of handshakes and why it came in. And it actually came in as a peaceful way to connect, because people were in so much kind of judgment and fear around meeting other people and not knowing whether they were a threat, that there was a lot of dueling and killing of each other. So they introduced the handshake as a way to have a peaceful kind of coming together of people that didn't know each other. And so, and now we've kind of evolved into hugs, and she was proposing that perhaps the next evolution of the handshake is taking a breath together. And I thought, yeah, what a beautiful way to actually be and just take a moment to be present with someone. And so my addition to that is, what if we were to take a moment and even share an essential oil, and be able to anchor us into that moment, into that presence. So, yeah.
Be that reminder for each other.
It might be, yeah. And what she was sharing with me was that, the handshake was a really weird thing because people didn't touch each other back then. So handshakes were really weird. So the breath might feel a bit weird for, maybe a decade or so. It will be the new normal. I also wanted to share just as a last thing that, that it's not that you're doing it wrong if your mind doesn't empty into no thought. I feel from my experience is that I spend, in my times of meditation, there's often a lot of thought. But it's that space in which I give myself to not attach to thought or not be focusing on thought or actually entering in more stimulus to create more thought. Because sometimes it just feels it's like this dangling carrot, that some people can experience of being without thought and they have that free moment. But it's not something that happens, for a long period of time. And it's not that you're doing it wrong or, yeah.
Well, that's a beautiful reminder. And I like to present two things. One is that, like you said, it's something that you can cultivate. And being is there whether the thoughts there or not. So you can still feel being, even if there's plenty of thoughts coming in. It's like you said, Anastasia, that the key is to not identify with the thought. And a really cool way to think about it that I really loved was about pivoting, pivoting is where you're presented with, say, a negative thought or a positive thought or both. And they're like little tiny strings, little fine threads sitting there. And if I get this little tug on the negative side and it says, oh, it's raining today, with this kind of downward energy of, oh, it's raining today, and I pull on that thread a little bit more, it becomes, I was really hoping it would be sunny today and I really wanted to go to the beach today. And kind of, oh, it's been raining a lot lately, and you just keep pulling a thicker rope down and eventually it becomes a chain. It becomes, life sucks. I just can't believe it. I never get what I want. And so on the other side can be the little positive thread, and it can be like, oh, well, it's raining today, but how beautiful is the rain up in the Cumberland Valley? And this, you pull on the positive string, and then it's like, yeah, I really love the mist, and I could read a really beautiful book today. Actually, I was thinking that I'd really like to read this book, and as part of my self-care, I'm going to delve into that today. And so I love that as a way to sort of pivot. And it's just something to play with when it comes to thought. And then another little tool is that as thoughts come in, just consider that you don't own the thought, that there's this collective consciousness floating around, and they're just offerings. So this little thought floats in and it sort of says, hey, what do you think about me? And it gives you a thought, but it's not yours, or you didn't create it. And so you don't need to keep it. So you can just let it float on past if you like. And that could be a really beautiful thing that you do in your meditation, as opposed to trying not to think, which often creates a contraction. And then I said there was two things I wanted to offer. The second is hold the vision. Hold the vision, our beautiful babies. Hold the vision for being able to get into a place where there is no thought, because it's just an amazing thing. To spend even a few minutes without a thought is just the most divine experience, and I just highly recommend it. So don't lose the vision of that possibility.
Thank you for being a reminder, Zachariah.
Delight. Thank you, everyone who joined us.
Well, I'll just see if anyone has any questions. I can't see any at the moment, but I'll just put it out there. If anyone has any questions, just type them in the comments and we'll be able to see them. But I think everyone's just been enjoying listening to you speak and hearing your transmission is really pivoting, flipping, yes. Not owning our thoughts.
Do it more, won't we? Invite people into this beautiful space in which we live so they can enjoy it with us. Who says you can't do it over a phone, hey?
That's right. Yeah.
Can still communicate the peace.
Mm-hmm. Well, beloved, thank you so much for sharing your presence and your wisdom and your heart. We really appreciate all that you are.
Thank you.
And
Simi's contribution.
Yeah, out my mouth. So, yeah. Oh, okay. We might have a question here. Do you recommend guided meditation?
I think guided meditation can be really beautiful. Yeah. Yeah, I do. If someone's taking you into a place and you feel a higher state or a more beautiful state and they guide you into that place, definitely. Mm.
Yeah.
People
Yeah,
used
I
to
feel
love receiving that from me in the Pilates studio. I would guide them into a particular state. Essentially, it was meditation. We just didn't call it meditation, we called it Pilates. And so I was able to bring people into that state that couldn't get there on their own or chose not to. And so, yeah, I think it's gorgeous.
beautiful. Well, everyone's just expressing their gratitude, so thank you,
Oh, you're
Zachariah.
welcome. Thank you for joining us.
We love you and appreciate you. Enjoy the rest of your
Mm.
blissful morning.
I will. Love to everyone. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, Anastasia, madam. Bye.
Bye. Bye, everyone.